on Facebook. If you can, do a shared, what is that, Lava? The watch party
A
on
watch
your page.
party. Uh-huh.
So I'll do that now for mine. All of that and more. And do a shared, what is that, Lava? The watch party.
A watch party.
All right, so we got one human on the line. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, welcome to Thinking Out Loud. Today is, it's just one of those days. I was going to say, lucky day to have my brother on, but under the circumstances, I won't say luck, but I'm glad that we have like minds, willing to come forward and talk about, issues that are taking place. So with me today is my co-pilot Lila Mays, as always, moderating the show.
Good morning.
But we got my brother, my Virginia State brother, VA Beach, 757, Roy Tatem Jr. on the line.
Yes,
President of the NAACP East Valley chapter in Arizona, amongst many things. Roy's been an activist for quite some time. We don't always chat, but I see what he's doing. Out in the Twitter sphere or social media sphere, and it's been really inspiring. So, let's start off, Roy, if you can, man, share with the people, what you've been up to, what you've been doing, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Basically, Roy Tatem here in Arizona, right outside of the Phoenix area. As of right now, I am a political consultant, advocate, sometimes agitator, and serve as the president of the East Valley NAACP. Would also run my own consulting company with Vanguard Strategies and Consulting. Also a former national staffer for Senator Bernie Sanders, deputy of African American Outreach in 2015 and 16. And also currently Arizona State University graduate student, doing my master's in integrated social sciences.
Awesome.
Wow. Congratulations, man. Given the current climate, I invited you on because I wanted to talk a lot about, police violence and as we were seeing in the headlines, you've done a lot of work with police violence, in Phoenix area. Can you share some more about, what you've done specifically there?
Absolutely. We've worked in the community for almost over 6 years, and right when everything was happening with Ferguson, we came across a report here in the NAACP that you were more likely to be racially profiled in Scottsdale, Arizona, or Mesa, Arizona, than you were in Ferguson, Missouri, or Baltimore, Maryland. All this was happening right at the same time. And that made USA Today. Like, we made national news with that story. The police were not happy with the reporting, of course, because they never want to look bad in the public sphere. However, it opened the door for a person like myself and some of my colleagues to come in and begin to look at the actual incidents that the police were engaged in and why the profiling was taking place. And also, right shortly thereafter, about a year later, Maricopa County, a sheriff's department run by the infamous Sheriff Joe Arpaio, who, for many in American law enforcement look up to, was faced with a federal charge from the Department of Justice, and faced with corruption charges, faced with profiling charges, and they pretty much had to revamp the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, which is the fourth largest law enforcement agency in the country. So right behind New York, LA, and Chicago. So we've so there's been a Sheriff Arpaio is no longer the sheriff. Sheriff Paul Penzone is the sheriff now, and I actually sit on his advisory board as he's restructuring Maricopa County Sheriff's Department. So
Awesome.
I get to see things from both sides. I know from the community aspect what's happening, but now
Right.
I'm learning from the law enforcement aspect of how they are trained, some of the thought process that they're going through.
Right.
But also I see directly the demographic makeup of these law enforcement officers, which are predominantly white male.
So can you break it down for us, Roy, a little bit, though? You said something I think is really important to kind of explore just a little bit in terms of delving into why we're profiled. So what does that look like? Like in terms of how they're trained, how police officers are trained, what is it that gets their attention?
Bias. It's their bias. They tap into, I mean, they're human just like anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, if you are hiring, I mean, this goes back to hiring too. If you're hiring law enforcement agents from Iowa, Nebraska, Montana, and let's just say there's just not a black population where they come from, they bring that with them. And if they're only brush with us or impact with us is through media, through music, through movies, they're creating their own narrative about who black people are or who people of color are. And so they have to check that. And you learn. I mean, I was shocked to learn some of the things, some of the culture that's happening within the confines of law enforcement and not in the Department of Corrections. Because in the Department of Corrections, it's segregated. There's direct segregation within the Department of Corrections that is supported by the correctional officers.
So you mean the population? The population is separated. It's segregated.
Sure.
Yeah, and I'm talking about racial segregation.
Wow.
And that's where you create the white supremacists. That's why so many brothers, turn to Islam in jail because one is some of the Mexican brothers or whatever turn to go into
MS-13. Yeah,
MS-13, right. It's a security piece, and unfortunately, and then you got the COs, and many in law enforcement now were former correctional officer. I don't mean to use just jargon that people may not know, but the CO, correctional officer, and so they all become their own little gang, so to speak, in this confined space. And when they go out into the world, that's their socialization into the world.
I think that's a really, really good point. How, once you're institutionalized and socialized a certain way, that obviously carries throughout your life, right? You're the way you move in the world. Pardon me. So what do you do on the advisory board to combat that? I mean, obviously you have a different perspective as a black person, right? So black man in America, what kind of tools are you giving them, Roy, to switch it up?
Well, first and foremost, it's a long process because Sheriff Joe Arpaio has been the sheriff for almost 20. He was the sheriff for like 25, 26 years or something like that. So we're talking about deep-seated, institutionalized, not just racism, but a corrupt way of doing things that served a small group of people. And so to dig through, to open that up, but also to have the federal probe on top of it, there are certain stringent guidelines that now the sheriff's department has to follow. And so what I'm learning, I'm kind of learning as I go from the law enforcement standpoint, but I can give a legit read from a community standpoint. You know what I'm saying? So what I'm encouraging the command staff, who at that point in time was predominantly white, now there are African Americans on the command staff. There's a African American man who is over the training of the officers, and so I get to have direct conversation with him And let me say this too, there's a huge culture. I mean, the police culture is heavy. I mean, and I don't want to as well, because we've got to work with them. They exist. They're not going anywhere.
Right.
So we got to make sure we know how to navigate and speak their language too. So, but many of our brothers brothers and sisters, when they join the law enforcement community, it's like joining a community or organization. You become a part of that organization. It says you're not black or brown, you're blue.
Sure.
That's the communication. That's the socialization in that sport. The point is that how do you look at other human beings? When you go into a community that may not be affluent, that doesn't give you the right to violate them. That doesn't give you the right to treat them any different, than when you are in, the higher end communities. And here that may be Scottsdale, or that may be Paradise Valley, as opposed to when you're in South Phoenix. Whenever something's south, that's us, right? Whenever somebody say, hey, yeah, that's on the south side, that's us. That's amazing how that works in like every city.
Every city, yeah. The south side of the tracks.
You know what I'm saying?
So thank you. So Roy, that gives us some great context.
Yeah, indeed. No, thank you for sharing. Go ahead.
Yeah, that gives us some really good context for a bunch of the things that we want to talk about, because a lot happened over the weekend.
Yeah.
Right.
And I really want to talk about Central Park Karen. And so I don't know, for those of you who haven't seen the video, there are several. The brother was in the park bird watching.
Literally.
And one of the things that I saw or read was that he asked her to put her dog on a leash.
Sure.
And the dog was so sort of out of control. He was giving the dog treats to sort of calm the situation down. And then she clearly lost her cookies. And we, for those of you who haven't seen the video, she lost her cookies. She's on the phone and she's saying to the brother, I'm going to call the police and tell them that you are an African-American threatening me, which he obviously was not doing. He's clearly not doing anything. The brother is Ivy League cat. He's in there, got his binoculars.
Like non-threatening black man.
He totally non-threatening. He's trying to see a marlin on his on a holiday. And she makes such a scene about this black man being somewhere that first of all, in my opinion, a black man telling her
what to do. Yeah.
Giving her.
I think that's for me, that's at the crux of the issue is that how dare he, right? Like in her mind, she's like, how dare you tell me, what to do? Like, that's not the racial agreement we have in this country, like you're not entitled to do that. Which is right. So now she wasn't in fear. She was just, her ego was bruised, almost, and she kind of responded, in that manner. Go ahead, Roy. Sorry.
No. Right on it. But when these situations happen, now I'm looking at it through a different lens. I'm willing to bet that she's never had an African-American teacher, coach, or supervisor. And she feels she's in embracing her own superiority.
Yeah, of course.
Right.
But she's from Canada, which, part of the American assimilation, for non-black people is, embracing the whiteness of America, which, deals with the caste system, a two race caste system, essentially. White occupies the top and black people are on the lower rung. So, she was pretty shocked that here you have a black man that's basically moving with a sense of entitlement, which I actually appreciate, whether he realized it or not, or, now we see him on the back end apologizing because in his mind, she's actually more of his community, possibly than we are at this point, he might still be like, damn, I can't believe, he did like the Skip Gates thing where it's like, I'm not like the rest of them, per se. Like, he's still trying to sort through that right now in his own personal space. Like, man, what about me?
You heard his LinkedIn page.
Right. Like, I got a cousin like that. That's not me. How could she not see that I'm not like the rest of them? You know what I mean? So it's like the Paul Mooney wake up call, essentially. But I will say for me, like one of my exactly. Wake up, brother. But one of my like driving themes is that African Americans, Black Americans need to become more entitled to America as theirs. Like he's in Central Park of all places. And I'll be honest, like instinctively, if I would see a white woman walking the dog without a leash in the park, would I say something? Probably not.
Probably not.
Yeah, like it, and that's for many reasons, but one of the reasons is that I know that what happened could possibly happen. You know what I mean? Yeah. But he went past that. And I feel like the upside to what he did, I feel like one of the biggest takeaways is that, we have to now start conditioning ourselves to kind of move in spaces and become entitled to those spaces. Like these are our spaces too.
But if you're into what you're into, if you are into bird watching and hey, this dog will disturb these birds that I'm watching that I know how they're going to react, then you probably would.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Because you know what you're there for and that's your thing. You know that this dog is going to disrupt that.
Right.
So you're going to ask hey, can you please leash your dog, thinking that they understand where you're coming from, not understanding the lens that they're looking at you through.
Sure. And I guess I wouldn't be bird watching. I mean, that's not my thing, right? But if I was in the park, my mother used to live across from Prospect Park in Brooklyn, and she had a canine, and she would walk him every morning or twice a day. And when she was very aware of the times that she could walk him without a leash, where she could walk him without a leash, because she did it once or twice, and they, reacted. They said, hey, you can't do that. You have to put him on a leash or whatnot. So, I guess I'm just thinking from a general standpoint, like how many Black people would actually say to a white woman, and even if it's not like we're shaking in our boots or we're that scared, but it's the sort of the norm, right? Like it's the norm that we just, let this white woman be because I don't want those issues. But he was justified in his position, clearly.
Oh, for sure. It's like being in a waiting room of a doctor's appointment or a place where it's quiet, the lawyer's office or whatever. And, white folks they handle their children differently. Mm-hmm. So if you got little Timmy running around, I see my mother, she would make eye contact. You gonna say something?
Yeah, right. Right.
And it's like, if you don't say something, I'm gonna say something.
I'm gonna say something. Yeah. Right. Timmy, I'm gonna need you to go down.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, and I think that
and normally they say, oh, I'm sorry. Please, little Timmy, have a seat. But in the age of Trump now, let's spin that, because in the age of Trump, you got a different attitude. We got a different attitude since we got Obama. So all this is just, get back in your place. Know your place. Don't get too happy. You got one president. We had, 44 of them.
Right.
We got
and it's starting to come out that she donated to the Obama administration or campaign or whatever. So, which is a whole nother layer, right? Of, us looking at liberals as if they still don't, reinforce the racial constructs in this society, because they do.
I have a real question though for people out there. Like I really would love to understand what the Oakland Park Karens, the Central Park Karens, like what is it? The young man or young lady who was selling water on the street, another lady came by and was like, you don't have a permit to sell water. I mean, this has been happening over the last several years. So African American social media is gonna find you. Like the first thing we're doing when this stuff is happening is pulling our cameras out. Right. But these people seem to be so emboldened, they don't even care. Like they're so caught in the moment of what's happening that when the consequence comes, when your job finds out that these are your thought patterns, when social media goes bananas, and now we know your name, we know where you work, all of that, and then there's an actual consequence, you're like, wait, but what? That's not really who I am, but we caught you on camera. You've seen it happen a million times before you. Right. So for me, what's so fascinating is there's no impulse control, which is a part of the entitlement, right? But there's absolutely no impulse control at all.
I was going to say that if you have 400 years reinforcing, your privilege and your power, you wouldn't stop this fast. Like we're trying to shift, an iceberg on a dime, like it's right. This is years of, years of behavior, or this is a behavior that's been undergirded by years of precedent, which is something we can, I'll speak to later on in terms of George Floyd, but there's nothing in the history that says that she doesn't have to do this, like she has all the evidence in the world that says, I can get away with this because this is how it's been. This is how it's always going to be in their mind, so, we have to keep kind of exposing these things, which, I definitely want to talk about the cameras and how they play a part. But, go ahead, Roy.
And it's ultimately a power dynamic, So this is, I have the ability to use my phone and call 911 to control your action.
Yeah.
Or to make you either leave or have consequences happen to you, not even aware of the, ramifications that may happen to myself. Kind of reminds me of, growing up watching the Wile E. Coyote chasing the Roadrunner, and the Roadrunner would get hip to what the Coyote was doing and just make the Coyote just run off the cliff, run real fast towards the cliff, and the Coyote so caught up in catching the Roadrunner just stopped, and the Coyote can't even stop, and he just go off the cliff.
Got it. And falls over.
Right, and falls over. So unfortunately, we've got to use some extra muscles. We've got to use some extra, wherewithal to survive this dynamic. And maybe this is the time to talk about policing and talk about how to deal with the police in our community, because ultimately this is a local issue. Policing is a local issue, even though we see the same thing happening all over the country.
Yeah.
And so we've got to have a collective consciousness, just like law enforcement has their collective consciousness on how to police.
Right.
So I think that's where we have.
I think our collective consciousness has been just survive, right? Like that's the talk per se. Like growing up, like how do you, live to see another day? You comply. You give them, their power per se. But I guess in that instance, she wasn't a cop, right? Like she's just everyday citizen, but she basically invoked the authority of the police, like they're on my side.
Yeah. All I have to do is tell them that it's an African American man,
and what's gonna happen. Like which really she should be arrested. I know that there's some protests on the ground
for false report.
Yeah, and given the context of the Central Park 5, we're talking about Central Park.
Right.
Right. It ain't that long ago, so she should, again, my vision of change happens once, the precedents are changed, once we start seeing arrests for this. Now we see, social media kind of doing their thing and, really exposing to, her company, the adoption agency, they took a dog from her, and she's, lamenting that my life is ruined, but this is the only way that you're going to really consider the consequences of it.
And the thing is, she's saying her life is ruined, but she was literally trying to ruin
trying to end somebody's life.
End it, right.
Somebody's life.
Right.
She's potentially trying to end it, invoking and summoning, police violence. She's like, what's going to happen to you, essentially. If I call them and I tell them who's here,
Yeah, we know how this goes.
Yeah, I try not to laugh, man, but it's just like the audacity, yo. Like, it's just mind-blowing.
And so what we're talking about what Martin Luther King was talking about in 1968 is the redistribution of the pain. He said people have been the only people receiving, on the receiving end of police brutality and murder and segregation and injustice. But now what we can do, we've proven our economic power. So let's remove our money from, and he named the businesses that, hey, don't buy Coca-Cola, don't buy Wonder Bread, don't buy Seal Test milk. He said all those things in 68. He said we should redistribute the pain to corporate America, because really that is the power. That's who listens. And that's who influences the policymakers. Let's not get it twisted. The policymakers are listening to the people writing the checks. Who's writing the checks? Corporate America.
Right. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
So that's why the Target. So hopefully Target, steps up and does something to help the community.
Well, let's get into the Target tie-in. Let's get into that, because go ahead, Hans. The city's on fire. Target's on fire.
No. I mean, pivoting from Central Park, Karen, I think in summary, we've all dealt with her, at many levels. And I think for me, again, my takeaway is not necessarily like that's going to exist, right? Like, and I don't care if you feel that way, like keep it inside, like once you start delivering, those thoughts into the public or trying to use that posture to bring violence to me, that's when we have an issue. But I just want us to kind of remain entitled, and use this brother's sort of, position, like he really was like, look, this is my land. This is my park. This is mine as well, So I think, we have to now begin to start moving in spaces again, like we own them as well, So,
and if we see it happening, we should not walk away. We've got to record it. We've got to be a witness to it, because if it's her word against his word, in this same system, we can't,
it was like a local defense attorney.
Great point, boy.
Yeah, there's a local defense attorney in New York that said so many cases have been, been proven by 911 calls. So like imagine if there was no video to support his side and it was just a 911 call, or something happened. But this whole the camera phone dynamic, really levels out the playing field in many regards. Yep. So, but moving to brother George Floyd in Minneapolis or Minnesota, who was essentially murdered. I don't want to like dress it up any other way. As we've seen overnight, we've seen rioting. We saw a Target burn down. That's where the Target conversation came into play. There's been some action taken.
Let's go back though. Just let's go. Sure. Just in case.
Oh man.
Or heard the George story?
You broke up. I couldn't hear you. I don't know if Roy could hear you.
No, I couldn't.
I froze for a second. I said, just in case anyone hasn't heard the George Floyd story, you want to it, Hans, and just say
to get that message
out. What it was?
No. I mean, I think you have to have been, out of cell tower sight to not see what's happening, with the brother out there. I've only seen the video once, but, Greg Floyd was arrested for allegedly trying to spend a counterfeit $20 bill. So the store clerk, they got into it, and the store clerk called the police for a $20 potential counterfeit, $20 bill. And, from all accounts, from the, video footage that's been released, he was going peacefully and then somehow wound up, with an officer's knee in his neck. And the last video I saw, he was lifeless, when the EMT got there. They tried to say he passed out or what have you, but, he was clearly begging for his life. He was down on the ground for 7 minutes. So I had the knee in his back for like 7 minutes. I could be, shortening it, but
it was a long time.
It's a pretty long time. Yeah, to have like, it's unimaginable, man. It's just, I'm kind of numb, to be honest, to it. It's just like, it's hard to even bring it into focus. But we've seen overnight the protesters have taken to the street. They surrounded the house of the officer who had the knee in the neck. They're still pushing for arrest. The mayor has proclaimed that it was murder. He's asking for an arrest. The University of Minnesota has severed ties with the local police department. So they've just lost a big account. So, hopefully, as we've seen with Target, as I shared with Lila earlier, Target's headquarters is in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And, hopefully that they will take a stand at some point in time. I'm pretty sure they're maybe a little upset that their store is burned down, but they've made so much money, off of us, quite frankly. Yeah, there's many definitions of looting. And I think that what, companies like Target have been doing, especially throughout this pandemic, it's like they're running to the bank. So, Roy, if you want to, give me your initial thoughts, on what you see.
And I'll say Target has been traditionally, or from what we've seen, a good actor towards our community, and an alternative for those that don't want to support Walmart. Many of us have gone to Target. Target has embraced Black History Month for the LGBT community. They've done a number of things to reach out to the constituency of their customers. And so from that aspect, I felt like Target has been on the right side of things. Now, right. Like you said, during the pandemic, Target, I'm sure Target has benefited, being, having, whether it's toilet paper or paper towels or,
right. Essential needs, yeah.
Right. Yeah, rubber gloves or whatever. Right. Their profits today, I was saying before we hopped on air, they're up 12% today.
Wow.
After the store's burning. So I don't feel too sorry for Target. I feel sorry for those that are employed, those from the community that are employed at that Target. I hope that Target does right by them, because they should not suffer because of this. What we should incorporate, or what we should push for, is a community corporate partnership for healing. Target has the resources to help to provide healing, just like when Starbucks shut down their store for the incident that happened in one of their stores in Philadelphia,
right,
a couple years back. Target made sure that all of the employees had a cultural sensitivity training. Right.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And so mine is, which is good. Many have said they didn't go far enough, but every corporation should embrace some level of community responsibility, because all of this is the community responding to the pain that they're in. We saw Philando Castile. I mean, we saw the video. We saw him shot, and we literally watched him die, just like we watched Brother Floyd, George Floyd, die. We watched that.
Now, I just want to interject real quick. The same attorney that represented the officer that killed Philando Castile is now representing this guy. So
Yeah,
that just came out. It is
probably
important because
probably from the police union. Which is a whole other dynamic. The police union, they defend the police to the end. They defend the police more than your mama to stand up for you. And at some point in time, your mama will say you wrong. At some point in time, your mama will be like, you ain't have no business doing that. But the police union, nah.
Yeah, they're gonna hold that line to the end.
They're gonna hold that line.
And I think about Philando's case, and one of the, it's always justifiable homicide. Now I can't imagine what they're gonna introduce. Like I'm just waiting for it. Like I know it's coming. That's basically where the huddle is coming. And
to assassinate him and to assassinate the victim.
Exactly, to justify putting a knee. In our mind, like, there's no way in the world. There's no reason for that. He's handcuffed. He's on the ground. There's 4 of you. He's under control. You know what I mean? Like he's not going anywhere. What's the need for that, right? Like what justifies you?
The question that comes is, what does the training call for? What does the training say? And that's the question that has to be asked. What does the training call for? Because one, I doubt that you will find that when apprehending one suspect, that 4 officers, nowhere will they say you have to put your knee on his neck.
Right.
Especially if he's not resisting, and he wasn't resisting.
Right. I mean, again, he's in cuffs, and I know resistant could mean, moving or what have you. But by all accounts, he was pretty much in compliance. And
saying I can't breathe, I'm hurting, like, pleading for his life. I want to say this. There's a comment on my thread on my watch party about the riots and the fires taking away from the real message. And so to that, I just want to say, we don't condone burning down your city or anything like that. But as we discussed earlier, Hans, we're in the middle of a pandemic. People are emotionally fatigued, concerned, don't know where, meals are coming from. There's so much pent up frustration, hurt, and anger, and we're still being killed in the middle of a pandemic. So at some point, people's stacks are gonna blow. Now, again, I don't condone burning down your city, but at some point, your frustration is going to boil over.
If I'm made to be uncomfortable, I'm gonna make everybody uncomfortable.
Right.
By impulse, and
I'm not gonna suffer in silence.
I'm not gonna be the only one. Like we're all gonna, we're not gonna act like this didn't happen. So
and further, if I start off peacefully protesting and then you're coming out with rubber bullets and all of that, you're not diffusing the situation. You are absolutely bringing it to another point of escalation. So some people can show up at Capitol buildings with machine guns and rifles and shotguns and stuff, but we can't protest another African-American man being killed without it escalating to this point. We got to take all of that into consideration when the top pops off.
Judging, yeah. I mean,
and I promise you, there are law enforcement officers in the streets dressed like protesters. They're law enforcement. They out there. So anybody protesting needs to understand that law enforcement's out there. So anything you do, they see it, they know it, and they may even be the one to break the window. But if you go in there, now you're the looter. They broke the window.
Yeah, right.
Yes, sir.
Provocateurs.
They are out there. I know it. They've told me. I've seen them. I remember being at a protest in Phoenix, in front of the Phoenix Police Department, and I saw a police officer dressed like a protester. And I'm like, "What you doing out here?" And he's like, "Making sure you safe." I'm like, all right.
Yeah, right. Wow, that's heavy. Which could. Right. So, we can't always view this through the lens of national media. We got to use our own objectivity. you know, those kids are out there hurting. And I would say kids majority, because, you know, they're the ones with the hand on the pulse and with the energy to kind of get out there and move. I saw a video last night again at the cop's house. He had like a fortress surrounding him, but you know, people are out there protesting. You know, we want answers, man, and
they wouldn't let him get food.
They wouldn't let the officer get food.
They wouldn't let the DoorDash or the Grubhub deliver whoever it was. They wouldn't let the delivery people come through. I love that. Right. That's how you protest. Use the
disruption. Yeah,
right.
It's disruption essentially, and you know, we don't know everything that's happening out there, but you know, I don't judge them, and for that matter, I put a link on my Facebook wall, and I put one on the Thinking Out Loud wall as well, that offers an opportunity to donate to a non-for-profit on the ground in Minnesota that are bailing protesters out. So they're rounding them up. So, you know, we can give a little to get them out of jail. But they're angry, man. And, you know, but it doesn't stop there, right? Like that's just one aspect, a necessary aspect. You know, I don't shun it at all. But, you know, what
you mean protesting?
Yeah.
You don't shun protest, right?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, you know, I want to affect from a different level, which is why I'm speaking here and, you know, have you guys on to kind of figure out, you know, what we can do in our everyday spaces, man, to kind of counteract this terrorism, you know, quite frankly, or, you know, not even from a broad sense, like from a practical sense, as you said before, Roy, how do we create relationships, you know, with law enforcement that will, you know, because, you know, at some point they have to take a stand, you know, like this is not just a Black issue. This is a nation issue, a nationwide issue. And everybody needs to be concerned, even other officers. I've seen a lot of officers actually speak out, not from that city, but from other cities that have come forward and have been like, this ain't protocol. This is not how it's supposed to happen, you know?
They'll admit that. A lot of times in private, they will admit that that's not what the training calls for. So what I would suggest is everybody in a local community, you have a local police department, call your local police department, ask. You can ask about the training. You can ask what police leadership is doing to make sure that there's not bias, that there's not escalation, that there's de-escalation. What mental health training and resources are available for the officers? Because to me, that man, his name just escaped me, but the man with the knee on George Floyd's neck, the officer with his knee on George Floyd's neck, had no concern, compassion, or even care about his well-being or his life. It was almost like he was not human to the officer.
Well, I mean, I think, you know, to that point, that's a greater context of this contract that we speak of, you know, where, you know, Black people, by and large, we're fighting for humanity, you know, to be seen as human and not be, you know, otherized. So it, you know, for them, it's beyond just a direct hate, but again, it's something that's been permeating since this country was founded, you know. So I think we lost Lila. Oh, she's coming back in.
Derek, that was his name. Derek Chauvin.
Okay. Welcome back.
Welcome back. Yeah,
man. And somebody put in the comment that the Asian officer stood by, which again, I share that whiteness, you know, can be accessed by all, you know, the power of this system can be accessed by all who comes. Asian, you know, even the local store clerk who were Muslims, I don't know where exactly they were from, but, you know, they felt it necessary to call the police for a $20 counterfeit, which, you know, there's so much about that we don't know, you know, that maybe he wasn't even aware that it was a $20 that was counterfeit money, you know, like Was he really trying to, get over on them or something like that? All of that.
And if he was security, he was in a cash business. He probably was paid by cash.
Right. Like how many times, I would say how many, but I've been shuffled counterfeit dollars that I wasn't aware of, and was like, damn, where did I pick this up at? So it's we need allies. I think about the Philando Castile case. I brought up the attorney because the officer or the defense basically presented an argument that because the officer smelled marijuana as he approached the car, and that there was a little girl in the back seat, that if a man can smoke weed in front of his daughter, then he was capable. That justified his fear. Like that was literally in the defense. And on that jury were Black people, who didn't push back against that, like who thought that was justified, or he was justified in the execution, under the law. And, we got to make sure that our allies in that area, Minneapolis is a big East African community, and they will show up, and I'm not trying to create a divide. I just want to make sure that across the board that they understand, like these neighboring communities really need to understand like what we're up against, and what's happening, so that they can like stand with us, united in these moments. So,
we're talking about the culture of policing.
Sorry, Lala, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Roy. Go ahead.
I was just saying that we're talking about the culture of policing. I mean, there's so much out there that continues to promote the police as the good guy. I mean, we're think about from a socialization standpoint. Who's the most negative cop we've seen in the media? That's Denzel Washington in Training Day.
Only the Black cop, man. Yeah.
Only the, what I'm saying? So, from all of this is socialization. We still think that the cops or the police they trained to help us. And technically they're supposed to protect and serve. But we haven't seen that play out.
Sure. I mean, that stems largely from the legacy of poverty, right? Like they know that most Black communities are pretty much just underfunded. And their duty there is to contain us, like we're not a part of the grand scheme. When you think about a Mike Brown and, any like low income housing, or like these are subhuman to the local law enforcement. They're not moving in these spaces, valuing those, those folks. They're going in there like our job is to keep you here, and when you make it out, we're going to push you back in, and that's, sorry, Roy, go ahead.
No, you're fine. And I mean, let's talk about that too. Mike Brown, Trayvon Martin, these young brothers were educated. I mean, as far as completing high school, Mike Brown wasn't a high school dropout drug dealer.
Right.
Trayvon Martin wasn't a high school dropout drug dealer.
Right.
These young had economic. Trayvon Martin was in a pretty middle class or upper middle class community. Mike Brown might have been in the hood of Ferguson, but he just graduated high school. Sure. So the thing is that the painting of a thug that Fox News tries to promote. So there's so many dynamics. There's so many layers of conversations. But these young men were educated. Our point is when they confront or when they are confronted by the police or by the George Zimmermans of the world, they probably got something to say back. And it's like, ho, who are you to talk
challenging my
to me?
Authority. Exactly.
Remember at one point in time, there were black codes where you could not eyeball or talk back to the white man. You could not do that. And so that epigenetic coding is still in the DNA, and we're like, oh, we're shedding that, we over that. But for them, they still think that they have control over us.
Right.
So what else do we do? I feel like it's really important before we end our show. We still have a few minutes, but I think it's really important for us to talk about there's space for all of us to do something. There's space for all of us to be an activist on some level. So some people are going to protest. Other people are going to pick up the phone, other people and call. And I think it's important, Roy, for us to talk about who to call. Like you said, police departments, but who else do we engage to have these conversations with? So protest, make phone calls. Social media is hugely important. We know that because without these hashtags, a lot of us wouldn't know about these stories. Sure. Donate, right, for like you said, Hans, for bailing the protesters out. There's so many things for all of us to do. Everyone isn't going to do everything, but everybody can do something. So I think it's really important for us to talk about who to call, Roy, those organizations that are helping to bail people out. Like we need to get into what we can do and how we can harness this angst productively.
Yeah. I would also say, let's understand your structure. If your city structure is a city manager structure, the mayor has no power over the police department. Technically,
okay, yeah.
The mayor, if you have a city manager, if your community has a city manager, your police chief reports to the city manager. So therefore, you call the city manager, because if you call the mayor's a political position. The mayor is just, they are more like PR. High level community relations, so to speak. But the city manager runs the department. They control the hiring, they control the firing, they control the budget, they control the operations of your police department. And most large cities have a city manager structure or in a co-city manager structure. So that that's where the power is over your police department. Just one.
Okay. I guess for me, a few things I look at. I try to be really a student of the legal process, right? Like, and how, the law was used to evade justice, in a lot of these incidents. Like, where was what does the law say? How does the law respond to these accusations? And I think we all need to become more educated about our rights within the law. From the Constitution, I posted a photo on Instagram about a family that had AR-15s, and even the little boy had one. It's not about promoting violence, but I think again we have to kind of operate from a standpoint of entitlement. Like, this is our country. We're due all of these rights. We fought and bled for these rights. And, I think a lot of times we acquiesce, once they start pulling out information, because we haven't even gotten to that point yet. Like, his past is coming, right? Like, we know in the next couple of days, we'll see some arrests in the past, or possibly even some video of him doing something distasteful, like all of that is coming. But,
it has nothing to do with the case. Right.
Nothing to do with the case. But what happens is we as a community, we kind of say, okay, well, we've bought into all of these narratives ourselves, and I think that, we have to understand that criminals have rights, right? As we've seen tons of white criminals get arrested peacefully that have done heinous crimes, so that should be offered to us as well. We recognize that racism it ain't going nowhere, right? Whatever's in that cop's heart that put that knee down, he's not changing overnight. Nothing is going to change his opinion. What he has in him is deep rooted, is generational. His grandpappy and great grandpappy, that's been handed down since this union was established. So, I mentioned the law again because we need to see convictions. Let me ask you this, Roy. Do you believe that there's been any progress? Do you see like Botham Johns and even Ahmaud Arbery, like what's happening in that case, where you see these guys being arrested for murder, even the guy that was taping, you see an independent prosecutor brought in. Like, do you see any progress in how these situations are being handled at all.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen. To me, it's progress to see an arrest.
Period.
One, because
you rarely see that.
If we did not raise our voices about many of these incidents, there would be no arrest. If there was not independent cell phone video and social media, a lot of these people would have gotten away literally with murder.
For sure.
So that speaks to the system itself,
right? And our influence on that system,
and go
right.
Oh, absolutely. And it goes back to the question of Black Lives Matter. And this is why, and just to give you some context, this is why the Black Lives Matter protesters targeted Bernie Sanders early on, because many of them said they knew that Bernie would listen and get their message to the broader community. They didn't protest Bernie because they didn't like Bernie. They protested Bernie because they knew that Bernie would listen and carry the message. Right. And from that, we created the Racial Justice Platform. And that, to me, was one of the most comprehensive racial justice political platforms ever created that was never talked about.
Ever. So, I mean, what an amazing strategy that we don't talk about.
That was a part of Bernie's campaign, essentially.
Yeah.
I feel like
if you just looks up the Racial Justice Platform, you'll see it, and you'll see we pinned that. I mean, your brother Hans was working on that behind the scenes, but we didn't get the publicity. That didn't get covered on Fox, or Joy Reid didn't pick it up on MSNBC. Roland Martin would talk about it on his show. And I know all these people, and I would tell them directly to their face, like, why y'all not talking about the Racial Justice Platform when you want to talk about race? If you want to talk Black voters,
I think, there's that's a greater political, the establishment, Democrat
shots. I know.
I get no, indeed. But I mean, I guess in totality, I think that we need to kind of always reassess and see what's working, right? Like, I think most of us have kind of become exhausted with these events because they are ongoing. They just haven't stopped, and right now, like you said, in the middle of a pandemic, we've seen an uptick, or what's being exposed rather. But I think it's always imperative that we look at, any inches that take place. We would love for it all to just stop, in the blink of an eye. But what is happening, within this system, that is working, I think we need to kind of like keen in on, because, it's something that we need to repeat, and many people, there's a lot of criticism about these videos. Now, I get the trauma, I will watch a video once maybe, and keep going, but this is, I guess, another question is, I kind of created a parallel to MLK and his nonviolent stance wasn't because he was, insecure about his manhood or he couldn't overpower, the white man per se, but he used that strategy to bring the media. Because without the media, they wouldn't see what was taking place. The world wouldn't see. Like now you got global pressure on the U.S. Like, yo, what's going on over there? So I think right now with these videos, I mean, it's like, and the sharing of the videos. Again, there's a lot of people on both sides that are like, you sharing that man's death, and it's uncomfortable, man. But is it moving the needle? Like. And should we continue to? I mean, I guess that goes without saying.
The success of the civil rights movement is pointed to legislation, 64 Civil Rights Bill, 65 Voting Rights Act, I believe 66 or 68. I'm sorry, 68. Right after Dr. King was assassinated, we got the Fair Housing Act. So those are the three pieces of legislation that I believe that it cost Dr. King everything, and that was the crux of the civil rights movement. And that's the success of the civil rights movement in spite of, even with losing Dr. King. And no other leader can, or a group of leaders from the civil rights movement. I know it wasn't just Martin Luther King by himself, right. But we attribute him to being the leader. But that's the success. So what is our success like now? Many people felt like the election of Barack Obama was the culmination of the success. But we had to keep fighting. We still have to keep fighting because Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Eric Garner, a number, Rakia Boyd, I can keep going. We're all under the Obama administration,
Right.
And to me, I don't believe that's by accident.
No, yeah, that was a lot of backlash, or white lash, as Van Jones says. But
Sandra Bland, I was thinking about Sandra Bland.
Yeah, indeed.
Put her out in the universe.
Okay. Yeah, again, I just wanted to highlight the efforts of like Lee Merritt, Sean King, what's the brother, the other attorney, who's now become like the Thurgood Marshall of our generation, Ben Crump, and what they're doing. People lament over hearing their names, but they're pretty much taking the lead. There's always like a smaller firm on the ground that picks up these cases and continues to fight at a local level. But again, I think a part of our growth as a community, our is to become more sophisticated in our politics. We got to kind of learn this mechanism and how it works so we can use it. We can weaponize it in the same way to defend ourselves and to seek justice for these. Because again, and as an exercise, like, people who know me and talk to me on a regular know how much genealogy I do, right? Like a lot of research on my family. And I'll just say that one of the biggest benefits from me learning my past, right? I've been able to substantiate my lineage into the 1700s in this country. Like I've seen touch points of my relatives. I've discovered I have ancestors who literally fought in the Civil War. So I'm like watching this Grant documentary on History Channel every night with a whole new set of eyes, like trying to see where I fit. But what that has done for me on a personal level is really empowered me, right, to know that this is my space, like this is my country, that's my flag, just like it's yours. And I think, on many levels, we have to kind of incorporate that mindset and not, because for years as a Black person, you kind of feel like you're behind enemy lines, and all of those things might be true, in socialization, but in reality, we have the same protections, and I think we need to start exercising or just again educating ourselves and approaching it from that lens.
And so, if you want to talk about the justice system, that means a big part of the justice system is the jury. And so, we Black people don't neglect jury duty because one of our jobs in the balance. If you are on that jury or not on that jury, right. So we need to make sure that and if you're a registered voter, you are probably a pool to be a juror. So we need every Black person that gets a summons to be on a jury, go to the jury duty.
Right.
Roy, we've literally touched on that every show.
Yeah. I mean, because it ties in, to the understanding that, this is your country. You have to participate in this system. And we have people in place. Like, we can't negate the incremental success. Like we can't overlook, we could think about the federal, presidency and that sort of thing and what Barack meant to people emotionally. But we have a lot more attorneys in the mix. We have judges now. We have independent prosecutors. Like, we have people in places of power you know, they have to be activated, you know, like, and our role at every station. I mean, if you're not a judge, you know, you're not an attorney, but you can sit on a jury, you know, as an
Right.
average citizen. So you can, is there a way to kind of put your name in the pool to kind of go to the courthouse and say, hey, I'd love to sit on jury duty one day? Or is, I mean, I'm just asking because, again, I'll be honest, in my 20s, I ran from jury duty.
Yeah, if you're a registered voter, you're in the pool.
Automatically in the pool.
Yeah.
Okay, but there's no way to kind of
selection
to volunteer, like to say, hey, I would love to volunteer.
Show up for jury duty. When you get your summons, show up. And when you show up, you get called again and again and again.
Back. Yeah, got it. All right. Well, man, this has been awesome. You know, I don't want to beat a drum. You know, I think we all been really affected by these moments, and we can kind of, you know, talk forever about them. But I just wanted to, you know, kind of throw some just different perspectives out there and some information. You know, thank you so much, Roy, for everything you've shared. And
thank you. I think we got to be conscious too. We got, and when we talk about being conscious, we got to be conscious of where we spend our money. We got to be conscious of who we support and who we condemn. I've committed. You've never seen me bash another Black leader or community organizer. There are a ton of people that get on my nerves that I have disagreements with, but I'm never gonna bash you.
Sure.
You know, I will hold you accountable, like I'll hold our Black media personnel, Black media personalities accountable. Because when you push one story but you don't tell another story, I got an issue with that. And our law enforcement officers, there's a real culture of retaliation within law enforcement too. So let's not. I don't want to push that under the rug as well. So when we say, why don't Black law enforcement officers do something? I ask anyone to think about the culture of their job if they're on corporate America. If you see something going wrong, and you want to say something, what's the ramification in corporate America? Same thing exists.
Sure.
Great point.
And so we have to think about, this is why we have to be involved. This is why we've got to be engaged and build relationships, because you begin to learn things, and you can make an impact. One person can make an impact. One group of people can make an impact. One community can make an impact. And so it's Minneapolis today, but it could be Chicago tomorrow. It could be Miami next week. It could be Seattle next month. It could be Phoenix. It could be LA. It could be, and so at some point in time, we've got to have what we're talking about, collective consciousness to organize and roll back the systemic challenges that are killing us and oppressing us and subjecting us to subhuman standards.
Sure. I mean, the war is a war, right? Like, and we have to keep marching on. I hate to sound, I don't know how I sound, but I think that the collective consciousness is a key takeaway, which I try to, everybody I meet, you try to probe them, like, where's your consciousness, right? Like, what are you conscious of? How do you see these things? Like, what is this? Because you'll see, like, for instance, sports, like Whitlock, right? I'm always going after him, but he's on ESPN. He's a serial apologist, right? Like, constantly using his platform to apologize for racism, like he wants to almost completely ignore it. So it's, trying to make sure that we see who our allies are, and see if we're on the same page, and kind of lock arms in our efforts. So that's why these sorts of forums are necessary, to kind of share, just to kind of measure up, to see where your thoughts are, to exchange thoughts, to make sure that we're all at the very least thinking in the same direction,
Yeah.
That's why I'm hoping our hip hop artists, continue to make conscious music, talk about what's happening in the streets, help people see a bigger picture. That's why I always appreciate Chuck D, KRS-One, M1, Sick Man, Dead Prayers. I'm gonna play some Dead Prayers after I get off this call with you. But
Yeah. Let it out, man. I mean, these are unnormal times, and this is probably a lot for a lot of people. I have a friend from Minneapolis who, was sharing that there's a lot more destruction happening in the city that's not being shared, on the news. Praying for everybody out there that's affected by this. Hopefully we'll get this arrest, without any more damage. But yeah, man. Thank you, Roy. This won't be the last, brother. Hopefully we won't just be talking from a reactive standpoint, but down the line we could come together and
I hope people reach out to you and tell you that they've called the police department or that they've reached out. How you can communicate with your crew and your followers. Ask them to let you know how their calls go. Let's begin to create that culture of at least calling and touching base with the police departments.
Right. Yeah.
We can do that.
Especially the police departments that overlook our community, what's the plan? What's the protocol? What's the procedures? So that we're all kind of in lockstep. Again, this is our community. I encourage Black people to step in rather than flee from it. Like, we built this place, man. And that's just as plain as I can put it, So cool. All right, Lila. Thank you again.
All right. Thank you so much, Roy.
Thank you, everybody, man. You guys have been attuned. Sorry we couldn't get back to every comment. I'll create a dialogue in the tab. We'll keep this conversation going offline. All right. All right, y'all.
Sure.
Peace.
All right. Bye.
Peace.